Hey everyone, welcome back to Tactical Magic. This is Molly Mandelberg, your host, and I have a very exciting topic and guest for you here today. One of the most powerful ways to look at your business, to look at your marketing, to look at your outreach is through the lens of simply storytelling. As humans, for thousands of years, we have gathered around fire pits and bonfires and in huts and in community centers, and we have told stories and we have kept like our history alive through storytelling. So we actually relate to things and people really well through that lens. And it's an amazing tool to utilize in your business in many ways. And I have an expert on that topic here with me today. So hang tight. We'll be back in just a sec. It's not just about mastering technology. It's not just about brand or messaging. It's not just about making more money. It's about showing up in a big way so your people can find you. This is about bringing your most wild and authentic self into the hustle and grind. Welcome to Tactical Magic, a business strategies podcast for the warrior goddess entrepreneur. Awesome. So Marc T. Seuss is a designer and artist living in Hamburg, Germany. He's the owner and creative director of the brand building and design studio Sweetspot Studio, where he helps entrepreneurs and creatives to find and share their sweet spot. He's also an artist, and his artistic work is an exploration of the inner, the non-rational, the dirty, and the sacred. And he draws inspiration from abstract and street art as well as ancient tribal art. Welcome to the show, Marc.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So tell us a little bit about how you got into doing the work that you're doing now.
So the work I'm doing now, as you just mentioned, it's a couple of jobs. You would call them jobs. It's just what I like doing, and I can make money of it. Yeah, I think it all started when I was a kid, basically. I wasn't too attentive, wasn't too good at school, so I spent most of my time drawing, doodling, coming up with funny little things to write on papers to distract some fellow students. And I think the first spark that this could maybe be something that's going to accompany me for a longer time, or that I can even maybe make money off, like the first entrepreneurial spirit spark I had was, I think I was 7 or 8 years old, and I was drawing up my first little my own comic book. Was solid 7-page masterpiece, and I spent my actual pocket money on doing copies of it. I think I made, 8 or 10 copies or something. And with the still warm paper, I went from door to door to the neighborhood, and I asked people if they wanted to buy my little comic, and it was just some random, silly, weird comic I came up with, and people actually bought it. And that was like, the two sides of it were so amazing for me, because on the one hand, and that evening I sat in my room and I knew, holy shit, some things I were imagining and I was putting on paper, people are actually having it in their home and they're reading it. That blew my mind. And I doubled my pocket money with it, which was also a nice side effect. And to be very honest, not too many things changed up until today. I come up with things, I find people who are going to pay me for that, and it's amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I think starting from there, I studied design. I was working in creative agencies, advertising for a little bit. I worked as a freelance creative director, and I always did both. I was always interested in exploring the creative side of the industry and my own creativity and how I can help people to unfold their own creativity. And I was also always interested in the entrepreneurial side. I did a master's degree in innovation management, which covers a little bit of the economic side and the whole business side of how do you come up with new things, even in bigger structures like big companies. How can you implement new things and ideas into maybe existing structures or build them from scratch? Yeah, and all this led up to me founding the Sweetspot Studio in the beginning of 2020. That's what I'm doing today. Mostly, I work with different people. I work with big companies, startups, small companies, entrepreneurs or creatives. And as you mentioned, I help them build a brand. I mean, we can dive into what a brand is, in my opinion, later on. And this is like my main job. And on the side, I do podcasts, some in German, some in English. And I'm also an artist. I do paintings and I do some performance art with music, and we call it artistic interventions. It's a collective, another Hamburg-based artist. And we do like pop culture rituals.
Awesome. That sounds really fun. I was
Yeah.
just hearing about, yeah, another performance art installation that was happening in New York that was like theater and you could walk through different rooms. Like there's so many amazing flavors of creation in this
Yeah.
reality that we can experience and that we can also create and partake in. So I feel like having been an artist for so long and also having been making money from your creations for so long, you probably have some really great insights both on how to give ourselves permission for that creativity and how to follow that thread and like allow things to come through, and then also how to um, deliver them to other people. So first off, like what are your insights about people who maybe think they shouldn't or they can't be creative, or who are maybe feeling some sort of a block around that creativity? Like what would you say to someone like that?
Someone who feels like they are not in touch with their own creativity, or maybe feel like they are not creative. I think I would first start with the question what value they put towards creativity and why they think they lack it in their life, or what they hope to achieve with creative expression. Because I think there's a lot of, it became such a buzzword, and at least I don't know how it is on your end of the world, at least in Germany, in Europe, creativity is like the number one buzzword on any application you put out. Every job description you read, no matter if it's just mopping the floors, creativity ranks on top always. You have to be super creative, driving by innovation and all that stuff. And I think it became arbitrary as an expression. So to me, creativity is a way of thinking, of structuring your day, to an extent even of living your life. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of expectation management. What do you expect from creativity if you say you lack it, you want to do it? And if you actually want to become more creative, explore with that. I think a big part of creativity is being playful and starting things without having a purpose in mind or without having a goal. So just free up some time and space to literally play around. Don't have any goals, any strategies attached to it. Don't expect anything of it. It's just, in Germany, we have this amazing expression called Musikgang, which is like musing and doing nothing all at once. It's like the appreciation of doing nothing and enjoying that process until something comes to you. All the great creative people I know and I work with or have as friends, we often talk about this, that if you're lucky enough and you practice enough and you're in this creative space that you can hold, oftentimes you're just the vessel. You're just the muscle. You have to do the training and the work, and you have to come prepared. But then something happens, and just as Bob Dylan said the other day, he doesn't know where the lyrics of his early works come from. He admires them himself. They just came to him. So you don't have to be Bob Dylan, but you have to, I think, open up for something to happen and just detach your conscious working, planning, structuring self from whatever child is left in you that just wants to play. Yeah. And then you can take it from there.
Totally. Yeah, I love that sense of playfulness, and also the idea of making time for it, or like cutting time for it, like having a moments where you're not scheduled and there's no desired outcome. I think curiosity is a big component of that playfulness too, of like, what would happen if I put this together? Or, you know, how do I want to interact with this playful energy that's coming through me? Or and also that focus on giving up the goal, which is such a like left brain logical mind thing that you know what's going to come out and it needs to be perfect or you're not going to do it at all. It's like, what would it take to make something messy and just see what happens? And that is where I think those flow states come through, that allows lyrics like Bob Dylan's to exist in this reality. Is he wasn't getting in the way of that by making each word wrong as it came out. He was like, I'm just going to put this down, and something kind of gets channeled through in that sense. And it's an enlivening process. At least I'm also an artist, and I know when I write words and put them on a page, or when I make art and like get into that zone, there's a battery charging aspect to it. Even though you're putting like an energy output while you're doing it, it really does fill your cup. So
beautifully said. As you maybe can see on my hands, I just come from the studio. I had a full day of work, and tonight before our interview, because it's nearly midnight here in Hamburg. I was in the studio just painting, and I can totally relate to what you said. Even in my everyday life and work, it's always this constant, it's not a battle, but it's yin-yang style, giving and taking between. There is creativity that I put to work for clients and that sometimes have to reach a specific goal if you plan an ad campaign or strategize on your brand building or storytelling. And then you have other forms of creative expression like music, performance, art, which you totally have to do a 180 and go. You maybe do the same. You actually use the same tools, maybe doing an illustration commercially, and then later you do an illustration on paper just as an artwork. And you do the same thing, but your mindset has to be completely different, and you have to put yourself in a very different spot. So that's always an interesting process of changing this mode you're in.
Yeah, changing the mode. And it's, I think, fuels the work that has to be right and good and hit the target, to have the creative outlet with no outcome in mind also. I have a friend, Minette Riordan, who preaches on that heavily, that to have the blank space where you're able to just doodle or like output your creativity actually makes it so much more dialed in. It's almost like a runner who has to sprint and get like a great time for his race. That's not the only time he's running. He's also running all the time just for practice, just for distance, just for stamina and strength and, power. He's practicing that in his downtime where it counts for nothing. So that when it comes down to the race, he can actually sprint and hit that target, or she, excuse me for making that gender bias. But so it's worth doing or being with your creativeness in the downtime so that other stuff can come through more dialed in. At least that's what it's like for me with copywriting too. Yeah,
100%. And I think, so without diminishing any form of creative output, but I still think there is like, if you go deep into creative work and the different levels, and I think you touched on this based on your artistic skill, your craftiness, your whichever creative outlet you want to choose, and maybe even talent, which you can't really work for. I think there's kind of a hierarchy or levels. Let's not say hierarchy, because I don't want to put something above the other thing, but I think there's different stages of creativity, so to speak. I think you could work as a craftsman in arts, in woodworking, in whatever, and there are a lot of creative and even artistic aspects in that. And still, it's a very different form of creative expression compared to abstract painting, writing a novel, doing a movie. Even those things you totally can compare. And I think there are always different ingredients to whatever stage of the creative process you're on. Let's say you work in a design studio or an agency, which I did for many years. I was always looking for this moment where this creative spark comes up the first time. So I started without studying, without any apprenticeship. I just started there as an illustrator. I came there with my drawings and said, hey, I need a job. I need a summer job. Do you have something for me? And the creative director at the time said, yeah, you can come and work for us. And I worked there for 1.5 years. And then I studied design. And I loved my job. But then when you're a junior designer, the art director tells you, okay, this is the overall vision. We have the mood board. We have the layout. We even have the grid. Maybe you can use this space to express yourself. And then you become an art director, and the space gets a little bigger, but you get it from copywriting and from conception and from the creative director. They tell you, okay, this is the overall line. And then sometimes you have the consultant who tells the creative director, okay, we need to target this audience. We need to be in this realm or budget. So I was always swimming through this, or navigating through this creative endeavor, always looking for the spark. So I ended up becoming a copywriter after I did design first, and then I later on ended up being a creative director, also working with clients, which was something that I, to be honest, when I first started with 22 or something, I hated talking to clients because they were always putting your ideas down. They were like, it's nice, but let's take idea 3 and 5 and combine them and maybe make it blue, and then it's great. Which comes down to the client's not trusting you, or you can't properly present your work. But that's another thing. So I was always looking for this, okay, where does this first spark happen? And at least the agency I then later worked on was really okay, you had the first-hand idea of the client, and then you go back and you draw on a blank piece of paper, so to speak, like the first draft. Okay, this is the direction we're going in. So, which is just a different kind of abstraction, and it takes a different skill set compared to painting something, copying a painting in a big artistic studio or something like that. And I just think it helps to be aware of these different stages, so you can know where to put yourself, where to collaborate with others. And also, if you're maybe listening to this and you're not on the creative side, you're having a brand or running a company, I think this also helps to understand where to put certain types of creative people. Are they outgoing? Are they people person? Are they more, are they in the productive mode? Can you just put them on something? You know what I mean? Is this something you also feel?
Play people's strengths and let them show up in the creative avenues that are really going to bring their magic through is definitely a smart thing to do. And I love that you're talking about, like, many listeners of the show are either entrepreneurs or have a side hustle that they'd like to make their passion in their business. So I'd love to hear more about that, how storytelling is a lens through which we grow our businesses, and how it can be a way to view our branding and our marketing as we move forward and expand too.
100%. So I think there's very rational, strategic business side to it, and there's also my very personal approach to storytelling. And I think I start with the personal one because I think everyone can relate. Everyone had ups and downs in their life. I went through some rough patches growing up, and to me, stories then were really like the magic door, the way out, the heroes, the drama, the cathartic moments of it all. So I really had this, I found great help, great advice, great mentors in fictional storytelling, maybe movies, maybe novels, even comic books. So this idea of there's fiction that affects life and that forms your idea of what life can be, which way you can go, which role you play in your own story. This came to me maybe in a very early stage of my life. So stories, as you could say, I hold them very close to me. They have a place in my heart. So this is my personal thing, which I think a lot of people can relate to, because you could also say, I had this discussion with a family member the other night over Christmas, and he is from a very different world. He's from an industrial and building background, and I'm like an alien landing on his patch of land, and he's like, what do you do and this podcast and design, and what is all of this, and how do you even make a living? And sometimes he's like, what do you even need it for? And this is just, to me, it's like kind of like pilot's training. You need pilot training when engine 2's on fire and everything is about to go down. And if you even have no touch point with arts or poetry or the creative side of life, you will have that at one point, and mostly when you're at your highest or your lowest point. If you're so in love, if you're so filled with emotion and you don't know how to let them out, and then you have a song that just can express all these emotions, that's when you need it. And at the same time, if someone in your family dies, let's say the worst thing that can happen, and you're so full of darkness and pain and grief, and you also don't know, am I the only one ever to experience this? Has anyone ever felt that bad? What can give me some kind of relief? That's also when you need art and poetry and storytelling. So I had this debate with him, which reminded me of this. And yeah, that's the personal approach, I think. And then there's a business approach. The very fundamental question, what a brand is. You know, a brand has so many different aspects, from the legal issue to the visual component to strategic component. But I think if a client asks me, okay, what is this thing? Why do I need to build a brand? What does that even mean? I always say it comes down to your brand is an image that your audience has in the head. Whatever your client got in their mind, that's your brand. And how do you form that? I think you have to play all cards, but I think we are storytelling animals, as Ernst Cassirer said it, the philosopher. We are storytelling, story forming animals, because I think there's a lot of value attached to it. History, the way we learn, the way we form relations, it's all based on stories. At the end of the day, your whole life is basically maybe just a story you tell yourself. Which things you put which weight on, which way to go. And yeah, I think that's why I believe that's the way to go to build a brand, because I don't always work for companies. I also help artists to formulate their brand, to position themselves, to express what they can maybe express in their artwork, also in a more commercial way. So I like this translation of your values, your mission. Why do you do what you want to do, or why do you offer what you want to offer to the world, and how do you promote this the best possible way?
Yeah, I love that. And I think maybe I'll speak from personal experience. My past view of what a brand is like, get a logo, have a good header on your website, and now you're branded. And it's like, this is looking at it through such a richer lens, that it's the story you're telling. It's the story about you. It's the story about your people and how well they can connect to that. And the images and the fonts or the colors or whatever are just there to enhance that connection of those people with that story, so that they can understand whether this is their story, that they want to come and receive something from you, or whether it's not resonant for them. And that all those components, the visual, the text, the plot of the story, and also just the energetics of it, are the place where they get to connect with you or not. And it doesn't have to be really overproduced and complicated to get that story through, so that people can feel whether it's for them or not.
100%. This reminds me of, I don't know if you saw it, the series The Office, the big classic. At one point, it was meant as a joke actually, but at one point Michael Scott said, there's nothing more personal than business. And of course, in the course of the show, it was meant as a joke. But if the more I talk to entrepreneurs or artists that want to push forward their work, and they put so much energy and life and thoughts and money and all the resources they have basically into what they think is the most important they can do with their life, which oftentimes is their job, I don't even think it's a joke. I sometimes think it's real, and that's the maker side. And I think it's same goes for the receiver side. I don't know if you ever heard of the Austrian philosopher Robert Pfaller. He came up with a theory called interpassivity. It's similar to interactivity. It's just like the flip side of it. It would take too long to explain the whole thing, but one of the basic principles of interpassive relations that people have with media and also with brands, in my opinion, is that you delegate things to objects or other people. Let's say your alter ego in social media is something you delegate things to always be perfect, to like the things you didn't even read, to share things that make you seem interested in a topic, more intellectual, all that stuff. And I think thinking about consumer motives and your audience and why they like you, no matter if you play music or sell tools, I think the reason people remember you and like you and feel attached to whatever brand you put out there is also coming down to this interpassive moment. I think that's the reason why in big cities people drive humongously huge SUV cars that are super impractical, but they have a sense of status and security, and you feel safe having one of them around you. Or why people that never work out buy the latest sports shoes, because it's like a promise. It's like it's the beginning of January. The gyms are filled with new members that will never go starting February 1st. And I think oftentimes we consume things, or we identify with products and brands to supplement something we maybe need or miss within ourselves, or things we want to incorporate more in our life. And not to diminish that, that's totally fine. I don't have a problem with capitalism in that way. But I just think that's a huge part of something you can think about when you build a brand. I think this is a huge chunk of the connectiveness with your audience.
Yeah, how we can bring people back to more authenticity or presence or self-awareness, where that kind of showboating isn't necessary. Yeah, and how we can be a stand for that kind of presence in every aspect of our marketing and our work and how we show up in those ways. Yeah. Really cool. So you have 2 podcasts also, and anyone who's listening to the show is already a podcast listener. So tell us a little bit about your shows and who should go and listen to those.
100%. So I have one show in English. That's actually the podcast of my studio. It's called Sweetspot Podcast, like my studio is named. By the way, do you know why I named it Sweetspot Studio?
Why was that?
My last name, Seuss, means sweet in Germany. So yeah, it's kind of a pun. The Sweet Spot podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, or on my website, and there I have 2 formats actually. I also do interviews and deep dives, and I also established a short form, as people nowadays say, snackable content, a short form podcast. It's called The Creative Coffee Break, and it's just the length of 1 cup of coffee or an espresso. It's 5 to 10 minutes, where I give quick weekly updates on brand building, design, just some inspiration, some creative sparks sometimes. Yeah, that's the Sweet Spot podcast. And for everyone who maybe speaks German or wants to learn German, I have a German speaking podcast. It's called Fugengold, which means, you could translate it like the gold and the cracks. It's derived from the Japanese tradition of kintsugi, if you know this pottery. If you have broken pottery, you fix it and you mix in gold to honor the history of a object, not to say it's broken and fixed, but also to honor this moment of breaking points in your life. And I do this with a co-host. He's a well-known media guy and professor for pop culture here in Germany. And we basically look for the underlying ideas of culture, of media, of maybe sometimes philosophy and art in everyday culture and pop culture. Let's say you have a new casting show here in Germany. So we analyze this. What is good about it? What motivates people to go there? What's the Schadenfreude of watching the whole thing? Stuff like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hopefully we've got some German speakers out there listening, and they can go check that out. I definitely wish I spoke German. I'll put that on the list of things to figure out and learn. But yeah, I'm really grateful that you were on this show. Who is the ideal candidate to come and work with you if they want support with their branding and their strategy and their business? Who does Sweet Spot mostly work with?
To be honest, it's more of a commitment approach. I mean, you can go to an advertising agency if you want a creative one-night stand, as I used to say. All clients I work with, it's mostly a long-term relationship in terms of, if you talk about brand building, you can do quick fixes and you can see results within some weeks. But to be really successful, I work with clients for a year, for 2, for 3, for 4 years. I did it before I founded the studio, so that's why I can talk long term. So if you're committed and have a vision for building a brand and you're open to have a partner, I always say I'm a muse and a business partner in one thing. I can serve with creative inspiration, and I can also help you develop strategies. And I have different clients from all walks of life, and actually from all over the world. I have people all over Europe and the US, so I can fly there. I do a lot of work remotely. Yeah.
Awesome. And we'll put the link to that in the show notes, but it's sweetspot-studio.com if anybody wants to go look it up.
Yeah. And I have a shorter URL for all people who don't want to remember so much. It's just sweetspot.studio.
Sweetspot.studio. Awesome.
Yeah. Maybe something I can drop here first. I don't know when this is going to air. We record mid-January. I think in early summer, I'm going to drop a new product. It's going to be online classes on brand building and brand design. It's going to be found under sweetspot.academy. And maybe you can also check that out. And there you can get workshops and brand building courses online.
Awesome. Definitely go check that out. This episode should be out within the next few weeks. So
awesome.
If you're listening to this in summer 23 or beyond, go to sweetspot.academy. And you've shared so much wisdom and magic on this episode already, but I like to ask this question at the end. Are there any last words of wisdom that you want to leave people with?
think I just want to go back to the one thought we had before that I want to leave people with. If your life is a story you tell yourself, what story is it supposed to be?
Yeah. What story would you like it to be too?
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate having you on the show, and I'm excited to see what else is coming through from sweetspot.academy. We'll keep an eye on that.
Thank you so much, Molly.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thanks for having me. All the sweet people out there, take care.
Yeah, take care. Thanks everyone for listening, and definitely go check out sweetspot.studio, and whatever happens, keep asking big questions and taking bold action, because you are here for a reason. Bye.